Welcome back, everybody, to the Construction Corner podcast. I'm Matt, and you get me alone today. No Dillon, he's out traveling. But in our effort to bring you guys pretty kick-ass guests every week, we are not stopping the show. So, with me today, I want to introduce my good friend Dale Caines. Dale grew up in Newfoundland, Canada. In 2000, then he moved all the way across the damn continent to Alberta. He spent the first 15 years of his working life throughout the oil and gas industry, land development, real estate construction, real estate investment, and now is the owner of Future to Now Consulting, a firm focused on small to medium-sized businesses and building systems and processes, which I have a feeling we will probably touch on today. Dale, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here and good to talk to some more Arte people that I continue to meet on a regular basis. I started 22 off saying that I was going to get on more podcasts and start to be a little bit more open about my story and my background and how I can start to help other small businesses and medium size or any business. I started this whole thing 5 years ago when I got tired of being an employee. So I jumped into my own business. I mean, I was in a lot of debt when I started because I just had enough working for really, less than ideal bosses or managers. So that's the brief of how it started. So by all means, let's get into it.
Yeah, I think that's a real similar story to a lot of us folks in RTA, which is why we're taking over the world. So I'm glad to have you on, man. I'm also glad because Dillon and I typically will kind of bullshit back and forth about the weather. He lives in California where it's beautiful most of the time, and I'm here in Detroit area in Michigan, and it sucks. But I finally get to say that I have a guest on who's coming from a colder, nastier land than me. So glad to have you here for that reason too.
Yeah, it's people when I post my pictures when I'm out on my outdoor walks every day. Andy got that started, I don't know, 3 years ago or whatever it was, 18. I forget now. It's been so many years, but I still do an outdoor walk/run every day, and I always get a chuckle out of my American friends when I post my pictures and I say it's -45 because that's when Celsius and Fahrenheit start to meet, is around that -40 mark, right? So I don't have to worry about conversions or anything like that. I just said no, we're equal now, right? So yeah, thankfully it's a little bit warmer now, but it's still chilly. I mean, we're still in February. Winter's typically not over here until end of March-ish.
Okay.
So yeah,
we're about the same on timeline. However, we're not nearly that cold, so you can have it.
Yeah, thank you.
So Dale, let's start off with your background. You kind of touched in a lot of different industries. It sounds like obviously we're a construction focused show, and most of the industries that I sped off on your intro there kind of revolve at least in some fashion around construction. So why don't you walk us through a bit on where you got your start and how you got to the consulting where you are now? I know you mentioned not liking to work for other people, and I can second that sentiment, but let's hear a bit about your actual history and your background.
Sure. Yeah. So I graduated high school in 95, 44 now. And then I finished an engineering diploma in Newfoundland. And I came to Alberta because it was in geology, that diploma that I took. So Alberta was the kind of the giving place to come because of the oil and gas. Right.
Okay.
So when I got here and got into it, I spent my time in Fort McMurray, which is, the northern oil sands of Alberta. I spent 2 or 3 years up there, I believe it was. And then when I came out of it, I didn't want to do geology anymore. So I went into geotechnical and structural engineering for land development and real estate, that kind of thing. So somewhere along the line in 2006, I actually started a part-time business of my own. The engineering company that I worked for, it was the longest company I'd ever worked at as an employee. The owner wanted to start building homes, and he knew that that's how I put, because we had talked. I mean, when I started at that engineering company, we were a small company and 10 employees or something. So anyway, you get to know the owner quite well.
Yeah.
And he asked me, through conversation, he came to find out that that's how I put myself through high school. I put myself through high school and college, basically, renovations, roofing, windows, that kind of thing. Because my uncle was a carpenter. So he, at 13 years old, I started getting into the bad stuff. And my uncle basically said, well, if you're going to do that, then you're going to work too. Right. So, my uncle's just looking out for me, make sure if I drop out of school that I've actually got something to fall back on. So
Sure.
anyway, so in 2006, I started this part-time consulting company again, where I built homes for investors. So I never had the money myself to invest. So I went and basically took a fee and started building these homes for investors, because that's when the market was going up. Well, all of a sudden that came to a screeching halt in 08, like everybody, right, on both sides of the border. So, so that company continued on. I mean, I still have it today. So I mean, I guess I did start my entrepreneurial stuff in 2006, and I've always kept it there. But after that, I continued on in construction. I was a general manager of a renovations and custom homes company for a few years. We went from, $1 million to $4 million a year in the span of about a year and a half. And I had to get out of that because the owner he had just kind of, I don't know. I'm not sure how to explain this, but he was at an age where he was always used to doing $1.5 to $2 million a year. So when we got to $4 million a year, he kind of panicked, right? He was like, I don't know if I really want this and that kind of thing. So again, at some point, maybe we'll talk about this as well, but that kind of leads to the journey about sometimes you'll make just as much profit at $2 million a year as you will at 5, right? Or 4, or whatever it is. So that's kind of what was happening with us a little bit. Of course, we were making a little bit more than that, obviously, but he was just getting nervous, right? He didn't like the idea of being that not hands-on with every single project. So he was a little bit confused on the growth aspect, right? And then from there, I moved into government for a couple of years, which I still have as a consultant, or a client today. And inside of government, I was still involved in construction, basically like capital projects, procurement, supply chain, that kind of thing. But I understood, basically where almost all jobs originate. So I got to understand the political level. I got to understand the administration level of government. And I didn't like it. I couldn't handle working because the level I was at inside of government, I was not a fan of politicians, not where one day you are, great. And then the next day you're not worth anything. Right. So as a person that comes from construction, our reputation is on our quality and the work we deliver. Right. So, and we typically know whether we're right, or we typically know when we're right and we know when we're wrong. Right. And we're okay admitting both, or most of us good guys are anyway. So in government, it wasn't like that. So administration, don't get me wrong, administration inside of government, I have the utmost respect for, and that's why I still have them as a client today. So they still use me today for, again, land development, construction, et cetera. Right. So yeah, anyway, I mean, that's the journey. And then somewhere along the line, I guess somewhere in the middle, I guess to describe the theoretical portion of my life, I mean, I've got probably 3 project management certificates now. I've got an MBA that I started in 2015 and I finished it in 2019. And, through that MBA was kind of when the story started to evolve for myself about, how this consulting company ended up coming to be. Right. So, yeah.
Wow. That's a pretty cool history. I never would have guessed the government consulting side of it. That frankly, to me, sounds terrible for the reasons that you mentioned. But can we touch on that a little bit more? What do you actually, and without giving anything away that you don't want to, but what do you actually do? So land development, are they coming to you when they want to build new buildings for advice and direction?
I haven't really touched on that. Right now I handle their so the government that I work with right now handles a lot of gravel pits. Whether we're going to buy them or we're going to get rid of them, as an example. That's one I'll use as an example. So what ends up happening is that I have to then either reclaim them, get them back into order so we can either sell them or turn them back to the owner or whatever it may be. Right. So that's where that kind of stands. And then I do offer a lot of my MBA experience and my consulting experience about, growth and strategy. Cause I mean, I know the people inside of administration that I've known for 7 years. There's a level of trust there that, they come and talk to me, and, because I used to be their manager at one point, and then I left and then now I'm back as a consultant, right? So, there's a level of respect there. And again, it's it's the administration side that I have the utmost respect for. I mean, it just, everything just takes so long to get through government, right? As we can all see what's happening now, right? So there's the administration level, and politicians typically tend to pick on administration quite a bit, saying they're taking too long or whatever it may be. That's not the case. There's so many levels of bureaucracy and hierarchy and everything else that the people have to go through on the administration level of government, and it's just, you can't put that back on them, right? It's, your system is broken. It's got nothing to do with the person that's working there. I mean, they are people that are trying to do a job, go to work at 8 a.m, leave at 5 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever they work, right? And they're just trying to get their job done, right? It's because they get caught up in the political landscape that makes it harder for them, right? So yeah, I mean, ask me to expand on anything else you want in there, but
No, that's interesting. And I think the inefficiencies in government obviously are not just a Canadian thing. That's I think that's no matter where you're at in the world. We don't do a lot of government construction where I'm at. We do some municipal work, and even in lower end municipal work, you'll see that red tape nonsense, as I call it, where you're right. The folks that are there, really just busting ass to earn a living every day, they're doing the best they can, but cutting through all the crap and getting to approvals and getting to decisions, it's painstakingly slow usually.
Yeah, correct. I mean, once the project is released and the funding is in place, it goes just like any other construction project.
Yeah.
But it's, I that's what I work on in government right now, is just how to, once there's an initiative announced, how do you get it to the actual construction process, right? Like I got a program that I'm working on right now with one of the other PMs inside of government, and we're trying to get this drainage project pushed through and get it approved, but there's so many roadblocks between one resident wants it, the other one does or does not, and so anyway, it takes forever. I mean, these projects, when they finally get released and they go to construction, I think what a lot of contractors are missing is all the work that went in behind the scenes of that thing, right? Like that drainage project we're going on, what are we in, February? So we're going on 2 years, right? That we've basically been in planning since we've gotten approval from council to proceed with the construction project. We've been 2 years, right? And we don't even have any tenders released yet for construction. And we're probably another 6 to 9 months out, because we still have to go through, pre-qualification, and we have to still go into environment, and get approval from environment to put through these projects. So there's so much that goes on in the background that, and don't get me wrong, it's frustrating for the administration staff too to take this long, because a lot of them were contractors that decided to go work for government because of more structured hours, a pension, better benefits, that kind of thing. So a lot of the people inside of government were once upon a time contractors. They just decided to take a government job because of structure, family, whatever they decided to take it for.
Sure.
But they're not. It's they're just like you and I. Like if you got contractors that mostly listen to this, that's exactly who you're dealing with inside of administration. So yeah.
So let's expand out of that a bit. You started this consulting company. You're not primarily focused on construction. It sounds like you consult for any small to medium firms. So what are your target or your preferred clientele? Or do you look for governments or construction companies,
right,
or
yeah,
who you target?
Okay. So this has been a journey in itself. So
it usually is.
When I started this consulting company, I thought that I was just going to appeal to landscapers, home builders, that kind of thing, right? I was going to help them build their systems and processes. As time has gone on, I am now dealing with, digital media companies. I am dealing with apparel companies. Who else is out there that I got? Another one's a landscaper. I mean, I do have the landscapers and stuff, obviously, through the construction process. But I guess I'll go backwards a little bit, because in the MBA, I took it for my own purpose. Like at that time, I guess I'll start here, but because there's that debate out there about whether you go to school or not school now, right? Do you learn from others or whatever it may be? So because of my age at 44, I'm still of the mindset where you go to school, to a brick and mortar school. So when I decided to take this MBA in 2015, that's where I was at. I didn't have Arte. I didn't have Lions Den, Ryan Stumans with Apex and things like that. Like maybe they were there, maybe, but I wasn't the person that was out there searching for it. Right.
Yeah.
So, Tony Robbins, of course, but I mean, you just listen to his stuff and you go, okay, well, what does that mean? Right. Anyway, now, but regardless,
Yeah.
through the MBA, there was a story. The reason I'm leading somewhere with this, through the MBA, I was inside of classes with people that were in companies like myself, where there was like 10 of us. But I also had people in my class that were working at Deloitte or working at IBM or, some of these big, massive companies, right? I finally came to the realization that it doesn't matter the size of the company. We all face the exact same problem. It doesn't change. All that changes is the gross revenue number or the amount of staff that you're looking after or whatever it may be. And I mean, I'm talking, we had people in there that were actually executives of Deloitte. So, I mean, we weren't talking to some, we weren't talking to a coder or something like that, right? These are executives that are sitting in these rooms. And when you're having a conversation back and forth, like you and I right now, we were all facing the exact same problem. It was just scale that changed, right? So, obviously there's a capital requirement to that. Like how much money do you need to invest and that kind of thing. But on a grand scale, the problems were still the same. So anyway, that's how I end up morphing from working with landscapers to now working with apparel companies, right? So we all face the same problem. And the number one problem that it always comes down to so far in my 5 years is personalities. That is the hardest thing about business so far, right? Maybe, I won't say nothing will change, but as of right now, the hardest part is personalities and how to implement, how to fit those personalities inside of a puzzle that ends up making money for you, right? And then how do you reimburse back to that staff member to make sure that they're still engaged and they still want to go forward and that kind of thing, right? It's how do you build that vision inside of your company that everybody else can fit inside of, right? Andy and Ed, they talk about that a lot inside of Arte. So it's the same thing. I just learned it through an MBA, and now I'm starting to see it inside of Arte and how Andy and Ed kind of handle things, right? So yeah,
that's interesting, and I see that too in my own company. It's the human capital element, which is always the most difficult. You have that kind of coach and team mentality, and you mentioned it like a puzzle, but to break through the psychology, right? The psychology of each individual and figure out what motivates them, what intrigues them, what makes them tick, and figure out how to place them in the appropriate spot in your organization so that they can excel at what they need to do, which in turn betters the company. But they also then have to be able to do what they're doing with person B and person C and everyone else in the rest of your team. And it's a constant, almost juggling match, trying to figure out where best to put people and how best to use the psychology to your benefit and to the benefit of your team overall, I think.
Yeah. Run personality tests to start, right? Yeah. So there's free ones out there called, 16personalities.com, I believe.
Okay.
There's the DISC program, the DISC, right? Yep. People hear that about a lot. I mean, you could start there, but the one thing that I have always tried to understand about people, and that engineering company that I talked about earlier, he taught me this, and that's why I stayed with him for so long. I was with him for 6 years or something like that. But he said, you have to understand someone's past in order to understand how they're going to move forward to the future, right? Now, obviously, there's some things you have to work on with a person's past because it may be destructive to your company, but ultimately that's up to you as the leader to try and figure that out. And I like inside of my consulting company, I end up discussing leadership through discipline. So there's the people like Jocko's of the world, right? That are just, you read his books and it's like, okay, just you want to know about leadership, go listen to Jocko, right? And get inside of his, what is it, Echelon Front or something, I believe, right?
Yep.
Get into those programs. I mean, those guys are the leaders, right? It's if you need to learn more on leadership, I mean, my leadership basically gets built through discipline and consistency and that kind of thing, right? And building those small wins every day. And that's how I That's how I build leadership with myself, because it's an evolution. And that's how I build leadership with the people around me. It's just, you have to show them through action. You can't just tell somebody, you have to actually do it with them and then show them how to do it. And then you can go back to delegating or whatever it is you want to do inside of your business.
Yes, completely. And Jocko, you mentioned Jocko and Leif Babin. First of all, Jocko may be the most terrifying human in all existence right now, but from a leadership perspective, I don't think you get any better than their tactics through extreme ownership and dichotomy of leadership. They're just great guys to follow also.
Yeah, the just the overall presence and look of Jocko is enough to scare you into submission versus actually doing something.
Yeah, the man could kill you in probably 100 different ways before you could blink, right?
Yeah, probably.
Let's get into kind of the meat of what I wanted to talk about today, and that's building systems and processes. We mentioned that early on. I've got my own thoughts and my own, frankly, inadequacies in doing this in my own company, but why don't you kind of lead us off on, what is the importance of systematizing things, and especially for a construction company, if you will, because that's who our audience primarily is. What are the benefits of actually documenting and working on building systems and processes in an organization like that?
So I'll ask you a question back. Why did you bring up the word inadequacies in your own system? Like why do you believe that's in place?
Well, I know why it's in place, and it's because we've been complacent and lazy.
So who's complacent?
Well, from the extreme ownership side, I am. I'm the leader of the company, so it all starts with me, and I've been lax on that. That's actually one of my rocks, my goals for this first quarter is to initiate a process where we actually start documenting and writing these things so that we can hopefully formalize the process and formalize it for, we're a growing company right now. There's 6 of us. 4 years ago, there was 2 of us. And we're on a trajectory where we're going to be bringing new people in. So I see the benefit of keeping things standardized. My business partner and I, we constantly butt heads on things that I take very seriously and he may not. Things like file naming conventions and structures, where certain things go in a project. And there's just a litany of small examples like that I could touch on. But it's one of those things too that, like a lot of goals, like a lot of resolutions, they're real easy to push to the side because we're too damn busy. And that's where I take the ownership of it. That's where I've let it slip on my own. I've let the growing revenue, the increasing number of projects, the growing employee headcount, I let those things kind of take a higher priority than what I know we also need to be working on at the same time.
Right. So you and your business partner, as an example, I mean, that's good that you're opposite, that he enjoys doing one thing and you enjoy doing the other. That's a good thing, right?
Sure.
Because if you're trying to overstep or you're trying to do something on his behalf, or her behalf, I think you said he, but
his,
regardless, when you start to step on each other's toes, then you're going to start to run into some problems, right? So if you are true business owners, then you have to define what your role is in that business and then continue down the path and then try not to trip up over each other, right? And have a boundary in the middle that says, okay, we're going to overlap once a week, twice a week in meetings just to kind of catch up on what each other's doing. And then you're going to move forward, right? So you've got employees. So obviously you're not, still fighting to get at a debt or find work or whatever it may be. So now is a time where you have to define those rules. So inside of systems and processes, it's all about structure. So the 4 things that I talk about the most are HR. Number 1 is usually always comes up first. Second one, strategy. The other after that, it's either operations or it's project management. It depends on which way you want to go, right? Excuse me. So systems are a checklist, right? It should be like 1 page, maybe 2, like front to back page. So it's only 1 page you're printing out for whatever task it is or whatever project it is you're trying to accomplish. It's got to be a checklist, so don't, when I work with clients on operations, I get into procedure manuals. So procedure manuals now all of a sudden will include safety documents, manufacturer specifications, safety, that kind of thing, right? So don't don't get systems and systems/processes and or what do they call? I hear that come up a lot. Standard operating procedures.
SOPs. Yep.
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
Yep.
So I call SOPs, I believe, if I understand it correctly, when I hear people, I basically hear systems, right?
Sure.
So, but manuals, I mean, I'm assuming your listeners are going to understand the difference between, a one-page system checklist and an actual operations manual. So
yeah.
Anyway, so when I get into HR, I start talking about the structure of HR, job descriptions, scorecards, performance appraisals, rewards. How are you incentivizing people? What benefits are you providing? Employee handbook. It's amazing how many companies out there don't have an actual structured handbook. What is wrong with you guys? Like, this doesn't take long, right? And we've probably already gone through 5 or 6 employee handbooks as it is, right? But employee handbooks, depending on the state, province, wherever you're at, your labor laws are different, right?
Sure.
So employees have different rights no matter where, depending on which state you're in. So, be aware of that, obviously, but have an employee handbook so that when employees come in, they know where they stand when they come through the door, right? The warm and fuzzy interview process. Yeah, I'm glad you're here type thing, but now the work's got to start, right? So have a handbook as the first day that they go through. And in safety, if you're in construction, is huge, right? Like OSHA is pretty big, right? So
absolutely,
you don't want to mess that up. And then that basically covers HR. And then as a holistic look at HR, you have to understand, okay, where are your people, right? So there's always discontent in the market, always. So when people say I can't find staff, that's hard for me to swallow sometimes. But anyway, sometimes there is that. Yes, I agree. Not very often. But if you're good at what you do and you post it on social media and you get good reviews on Google and et cetera, people are going to be looking to come work for you, right? So when you have a job applicant come in, then all of a sudden you can sell them on that kind of stuff, and that's going to make them want to come with you. Anyway, that's trying to understand your external market and where people are coming from and who do you need, right? Then we get into, once the interview's over and they actually come into the company, well, now we're talking about how are they going to stay at the company, and then at some point, however that works, they have to leave the company. Now, what does that mean, right? Did they pass away? Did you fire them? Did they quit? Whatever it may be. So, one thing I've understood that anything in business is that everybody's replaceable, right? As many companies as I've left in the past, there's that, as I got older now, I understand this, but when I left, I'm like, you guys are not going to make it, right? So you kind of chuckle when you walk out the door, and all of a sudden you look back 6 months, you're like, oh shit, they're still there, right? So
yeah, right.
Anyway, so my point being is that you're always replaceable. So don't think that you're bigger than something else, because it's just they will replace you and they'll continue on, right? Unless they decide to just close and whatever, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, that's HR. So strategy, touch on a little bit, because it's strategy, you get pretty deep on it, right? But
sure,
you go into core values and vision, mission statement, what are your competitors doing, if that applies to you, and then how are you formulating what you're doing as a business in order to proceed forward, right? So once you've understood the HR component and you've got the proper people in place, well, now all of a sudden you can move forward into strategy, right? Not really a whole lot to worry about inside of strategy if you're still struggling inside of HR, right? Because you got to develop a structure, you got to develop some people in order to get ready to go to the strategy level and decide what you're going to do next. And you brought that up earlier, is that you're trying to, basically what you and your business partner are trying to figure out is, how do I go from reactive to proactive, right? Those are the 2 words you're trying to figure out as a business yourself.
Exactly.
And then once you figure out the HR component and who you can trust and they've been around for a while, well, now you can start delegating tasks. Then you, business owners, you guys can start working on what's your strategy, right? Okay.
Yeah. All right. So that's the beauty of technology. We were right in the middle of discussing strategy.
Yes. Sorry about that. I didn't normally I'll see a notification saying, you know, your internet is lacking or something, but I didn't get anything. So just cut out all of a sudden. So anyway, so operations is, you know, just figure out the basics about where are people, where's your supply chain, what's your procurement, what contracts do you have in place? You know, don't do anything on a handshake anymore. I mean, sure, we all still want to believe in people and believe people are true, but put it in writing. You know, if you got a project manager in place, if you're sending out, you know, if you're doing a bunch of phone calls, make sure you back that up with emails, right? That's kind of the operations component, because operations is what's going to make you money. And you want to make sure that that's looked after. And then project management is pretty, again, I'll try and summarize project management, because it's just, you're just trying to get a project has a beginning and it has an end. That's the definition of a project. Like a business is not a project. That's, you know, that's infinite. That just keeps going. Whereas if you're taking on a renovation, it has a beginning and an end. That's a project. So, and inside of that, you're looking at the, you know, triple constraint triangle that they identify inside of project management: time, quality, cost, schedule, that kind of thing, right?
Yep.
And now all of a sudden you're getting into risk monitoring. I mean, actually, before I get the risk, one of the other things is to identify who the stakeholders are inside of that company or inside of that project. So that could be banks, accountants, lawyers, owners like yourself, staff, subtrades, whatever it may be. So, and then once you've identified who the stakeholders are, you've identified the scope, you know, and the triple constraint. Now the biggest thing to worry about is your risk, right? What's your risk inside of each thing you're doing inside of that project? And can you mitigate it? Can you get rid of it? You know, do you make it less impactful, or is there a way around it? You have to write change orders inside of construction, all that kind of stuff, right? And then you close out. But, you know, one of my biggest thing, I mean, I'm up to, I don't know how many freaking homes have I built? 1,000. I got to be over 1,000 homes I've built by now.
Okay.
I've done probably 500 renovations, and then I've had 12 to 15 of my own homes that I've built, renovated, you know, sold, whatever it is. So the hardest thing about construction, and I mean, I've been on billion-dollar industrial expansions in Fort McMurray, and the hardest thing about construction is the last 10%, right? I call it that Achilles heel of construction, and it's that last 10%. And it's just a nightmare sometimes. And you just got to put all your resources that you can towards it to try and solve that problem, because it's just, it can turn sideways on you. And then all of a sudden you're losing all your profit. And yeah, it's just, anyway, that's, you know, project management summed up real quick. So those are the four anyway that I deal with: HR, strategy, operations, and project management. So that's what my consulting company is based on. And everything I do is inside of the experience that I have. I don't give any advice. I don't believe in that as a consultant, to give someone advice. I give them the experience that I've actually lived through. If I can't give you the answer, I will send you to another business or wherever you're going to try and solve whatever problem you're after. It's just, I don't need that on my conscience. And when I go to sleep at night, I know that I've done everything I probably could have that day. And that's about where I leave it. So yeah.
Oh, and that's why you're doing well, is because you've actually lived it. You've had these experiences. You know, there's a lot of self-help gurus and quote unquote coaches out there. There's maybe they're not more now than ever, but more than I ever have seen now. And most of them have never done a damn thing in their entire existence. So, you know, to come from a level of experience like you have, you know, building 1,500 some odd homes, that's pretty impressive.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, one of the companies I worked for, we went into, like, that sounds like a lot of homes, but I guess it is. But you know, we had basically a subdivision knocked out, right?
Sure.
And we went in there with, like, you know, 300 lots and just banged out the houses. Like, you literally went down the street, like, you know, foundation, but you know, you just set up all your trades and you went, right?
Sure.
I even had it contracted out, where I had project managers contracted out to me to look after the freaking day to day, right? If you know, if your listeners are familiar with home building, can you imagine having 300 homes, right? Just lined up like one after another? Like that's just a logistical nightmare, right?
Absolutely,
you know,
it is.
windows and doors and tubs, and yeah, it's so, you know, lumber packages and windows, and oh my goodness. So yeah,
That's the constant struggle in construction is managing. I mean, we talked about managing people in the very beginning. When you're talking about that scale and that, you know, tract home building style,
yeah,
the number of people on your team that you're managing is huge. And if you let one slip, you know, it's the domino effect, and it'll come screeching to a halt, everything behind it. And, you know, you're out of luck at that point, right?
it is, you know, it is huge. But I mean, if you got to have a level of trust in the people that you've got there, right? So if you've got no level of trust and you're just let's pretend you're 1 year in business and you're just starting out at this thing, and you all of a sudden you pick up 300 track homes, which is probably highly unlikely. But if you do, by some stroke of imagination, you're going to suffer immense pain, right?
You'll learn.
Yeah.
The universe,
Well,
the universe has a way of teaching you real fast.
You'll learn, and hopefully you don't lose all the capital invested, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
I love it. Dale, what would your favorite tip that you give to leaders be? Do you have a favorite leadership or management tip that you like to leave with folks? We've got a lot of people in our audience that are similar to us. They're business owners in and around the construction industry with, employees ranging from, a couple to a couple hundred.
Yeah. Lead by experience. We touched on that and we talked back and forth, is just, lead by experience and lead by action, right? It's, if we're talking about a leadership component, that'd be the biggest thing. And then after that, as a company, make sure you got some rules set in place. And the theoretical term for that is governance. So governance is the term that's used that owners have created as a path forward for staff, right? And then now all of a sudden it's up to the project managers to take those rules, so to speak, and move forward with a project. So that's the managerial component, is to make sure that you don't have a bunch of owners that are wishy-washy and they're changing their mind day to day. And, one day it's this, next day it's that. That's just so hard to do. And yourself as a business owner, I mean, you guys got to be prepared for that. And that's why the discussions need to happen in the backgrounds between you and your business partner about, okay, how are we making this path forward? Because the more unorganized we appear, just causes even more culture problems down the line. So you're at 6 employees, I think you said, right? Yeah. So yeah, now's the time to get that under control and find out how to reimburse your staff better so that they stick around for the long term and they don't end up become competitors of yours, right? So, you might have to, obviously there's going to be a point where you're probably going to end up taking less money than your staff members are, but there's a reason for that. It's all about growth and scalability and that kind of thing. Now, I've got a client right now that's on the path of selling their business as well. So they're on a different path where they're trying to reduce overhead and increase, the labor portion, because that's the profitability side, so that they can show better numbers, right? So, sure. But I mean, overall, most people get into business because they want to be their own boss, and they don't, right now they may not be thinking about selling their business, so to speak, right? And in construction, I don't hear of a lot of construction companies selling their business, because most people are just like, well, I'll just go start my own. Why do I need to buy yours for? Right? Because like when I was running that renovations company, projects come and go and then they stop. And typically that client doesn't come back for 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. And that's just it. There's not a whole lot of asset management in a construction company on the GC side, especially. The subcontractors are a different story. You've got capital and you've got assets, equipment, all these things. Those have a tangible value. But to your point, yeah, to sell a general contracting firm, it's not impossible by any means, but it's tough, because a lot of these firms, once the leader is out of the picture, the firm fizzles. It's so much relationship capital that you can't replace with a dollar value.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, agreed. And it's a journey, man. So it's yeah.
So Dale, we're coming up on time here, but I'm going to ask you a question we ask almost every guest we have on, and it's a 2-pronged attack here. So the question is, what do you see as the biggest problem in our industry as a whole? And the second prong is, what do we do about it to fix it? Because we're big on finding problems here and providing solutions at the same time.
Oh man, my mind, we started talking about this at the beginning before we even got on the air. And, the biggest problem that I see right now is government. It's just, there's a lot of corruption out there on both sides of the border, Canada and the US.
Absolutely, there is.
And, right now that appears to me to be the biggest problem. Because, without freedom that we're all used to, then where do we stand, and what are we even working towards anyway? Right? If we're going to end up giving it back to someone else. I mean, like Canada right now, where they're freezing bank accounts as an example, right? It's just like how do you how do you deal with that? Right. So if we don't have the buy-in from the politicians that, that we're supposed to elect and that are supposed to serve our best interest, then, where do you go from there? That's the number one problem for sure. The second one is why I started this consulting company. And that's, business owners have got to be better, and they've got to be more aware of the staff that are around them. And what I mean by that is I was one of those employees that sat in an office. I've had jobs right from labor all the way to C-suite executive positions. And, no one ever teaches you the questions that you're supposed to ask as a staff member, right? So I've got a book coming out, and I hope that book addresses a lot of the tactical information that will cross off those, dot those I's and cross those T's. But a lot of employees don't even know what questions they need to be asking, like about strategy and, what's our path and what's the vision and what's the core values and, how do I even ask for a raise or I've never had a performance appraisal done before or anything like that. And a lot of owners, if they get stuck for too long inside of that proactive reactive stage, they lose a lot of the staff that should still be there, right? You've probably got instances in your mind that you've gone through that you've lost staff members, or you've been working for other companies and lost people, and you're like, we should have never lost that person.
Oh yeah.
Right. So, that's the biggest issue that I see right now is that, a lot of employees just they're lost, and a lot of owners don't really direct them on where to go because they're more interested in making profit and selling their business than they are looking after that staff member. Not everybody, but I mean, I spent 15 years as an employee, and I mean, that was pretty much the resounding theme the whole time, right? For 15 years. And I was a 2-year employee, right? After 1 year, I'd do my best and work for a year. And then next thing you know, I'm like, okay, well now where am I going? What am I doing? So,
Sure.
And then I would ask the questions, but I mean, those questions never got answered. So then I'm like, okay, well, I'm wasting my time to leave. So, the one company that I did stay at the longest, like I said, they always answered those questions until finally got to a point where I was like, okay, well, I need more than this. I need, ownership or shares or something. And they're like, no, not happening. So I was like, okay, well, then I got to go find something else. So anyway, those are the two things, I guess, to say that I see as a challenge right now. And how do you fix it? Government, man. You just got to say something. That's the biggest thing. You just got to say something. You just can't sit there and expect that these politicians that you pay for with your tax dollars are just going to fix it, right? I won't speak on the American side, but on the Canadian side, I mean, the politicians that are in place right now, and it's not just one party. It's just not liberals or conservatives. They're all corrupt, right? Because I've done the history and I've done the research and I've gone back as much as I can with the time that I have to find out that the corruption is there. It exists. If you dig for it, it's there. You'll find it. And you just got to speak up. And when you've had enough, you just got to say, okay, I've had enough. Right. And I guess that kind of goes into solving the second problem that I brought up as a staff member and an owner. You just got to decide when enough is enough. When is the pain too much? And when are you going to say something, or when are you going to quit, or whatever it may be? For you and your business partner, same thing, right? You guys will get to a breaking point where you're okay, something's not working. We're fighting each other, and we just got to fix this if we believe in the mission and the vision and where we're going with all this, right? So if we have more time, I'm sure we could pick that apart too if you want it. But yeah, anyway, it's I hope that's a broad enough but tactical enough answer to answer any questions. I mean, I guess I hit up on 4 of the pillars that I go through inside of consulting to help with the tactic piece as well. So yeah, I mean, like I said, hopefully leaving, I hope I left with some tactics that people could take and not just another rah Tony Robbins speech, so to speak. So I don't mean to pick on Tony, but Tony's awesome.
No, I think you did well. And I think you did leave some tactical nuggets here for everybody to kind of to gain and learn from. And, I agree with your sentiment wholeheartedly, first of all, about the issues in government. And it's not just relegated to the Canadian side by any means. But, at the end of the day, it breaks down to really simple errors and lack of communication. Right. And it's us as people not standing up and communicating what we want. It's politicians not communicating what they're really doing. There's all kinds of things going on here, and we're not going to solve it today by any means. But
Yeah, I mean, like you
it's,
look at you and I mean, we're separated by 3,000 miles and a country border, right? But
yeah,
what you want, what I want are the exact same thing, right? Sure, there's some
absolutely.
discrepancies in there as well, but I mean, there has to be. That's what makes democracy, right? You're not always supposed to agree with somebody. So yeah, it's that's the simple of it, man. We all want the same stuff. It doesn't matter if you're left, right, middle, far left, far right. It's all the same thing. Well, maybe not if we go to the far left and right, but you know what I mean. 80
I
to
think,
90% of us all want the same stuff.
yeah, I think most of us are all more centrally leaning than people realize. And, freedom ain't free, that's for sure.
You got it.
But that's what we all want, man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
My grandparents fought in the war. And, I fully intend on not being the generation that lets that freedom go away. After I'm gone and my kids have to, take the torch, so to speak, then if it's on them, it's on them. But I don't intend on letting it slip through me. So yeah.
once you lose it, I don't know if we'll ever get it back if we lose it. So I'm there with you. We
No,
got it.
Andy's stories on Instagram right now are spot on. This is
Yeah.
the chance right now. I think if this slips away and politicians get away with whatever they're trying to do, I think it'll be a very hard struggle to try and get it back. So it's like we were talking before the air. I mean, I was sitting here 3 to 6 months ago saying I don't understand how Australia got to where it is. And here we are in Canada, right? I mean, if you watch the lives today, it was Friday, February 18th, right? 2022. If you watch the lives in Ottawa right now, it's happening here now too. What was happening in Australia? So, yeah, just as a friendly reminder to my American friends, as I've got lots of them now, it's very close to you now. So be aware.
It really is, and I appreciate the sentiment. I hope everybody listening is of the same. And we all need to work together to fix these things, whether it's problems in business, problems in government, problems in our livelihoods. We touched on a lot today. And
yeah, that's good. And the other thing is, and people ask me, they're like, well, who's going to solve these problems? My answer always is entrepreneurs, right? Our job as entrepreneurs are to be resourceful and to use the resources around us to solve a problem, right? That's why we got into business, right? And at the end of the day, we pay their wages. We pay the politicians. We pay for the roads. We pay for the bridges, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How we get out of this is through entrepreneurial spirit, right? That's what we all got in. That's why we're in the countries we're in, and that's why we started what we started, right? Is that we're looking for that next level, and that's how we get through the whole thing. I mean, politicians eventually have to listen to the voters and have to listen to the money. So, yeah, awesome.
You got it, brother. I can't even add to that one. That's perfectly stated, man. Dale, how can people find you?
Just go to my website, futuretonowconsulting.com, and you can find my links from there. So there's no point in trying to go through all my Instagram handles and all that kind of stuff. You'll find it through that website. I am working with a company out of Utah that's helping me with my SEO and stuff like that. So I'll be uploading a lot more content in the coming days and that kind of thing. So and if you do want to find me personally, once you go to my website, it'll take you to my business pages, and then you can find me from there as well. If you want to go to my personal pages and that kind of thing, I'm always up for a discussion. I'm over arguing with people, right? It's like that part of my life is done. I left high school freaking 27 years ago. Like that's done with me. So if you're coming for an argument, you're picking on the wrong person. I don't care what you do. I'm about to do what I'm doing. So you go ahead and do you, because I'm going to do me. David Goggins, right?
There you go.
That's one thing I've learned from that man here recently. So yeah. Yeah.
I love it. Guys, futuretonowconsulting.com. Check him out. Link up with Dale. And he said he's got a book coming out. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that, and maybe get you back on once you're ready to release it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Let me know.
Dale, I appreciate it. And guys, that is this episode of the Construction Corner podcast. We will catch you next week.